The morning sun streamed through the expansive windows of Forrester Creations, casting long shadows across the design studio. The air was thick with anticipation and creative energy as the design team moved about their workstations, sketching, pinning fabrics, and discussing the latest collection concepts. It was supposed to be an ordinary Monday morning, a day like any other in the prestigious fashion house. But nothing about this day would prove ordinary. Katie Logan had summoned the courage to bring her new fashion collection to Forrester Creations. Hoping to get honest feedback from the design team she had come to respect. She had invested months into this project, working late nights in her private studio, obsessing over every seam, every color palette, every conceptual detail. Logan Designs represented her independence. Her break from being known simply as the Logan sister, or the one involved in family drama. For the first time in her life, Katie wanted to be recognized for her own creative vision. The collection was elegant yet accessible, sophisticated yet innovative. It reflected her understanding of women, their struggles, their strengths, their desire for clothes that made them feel powerful. Each piece told a story, carried an intention, expressed a vision that Katie had poured from her very soul. She had no idea that Ridge Forrester was in the building. Ridge had arrived earlier than expected, sweeping into the design studio with his characteristic confidence. He was dressed impeccably in a tailored charcoal suit, his blonde hair perfectly styled, his expression one of practiced superiority. Behind him walked two junior designers who seemed almost nervous in his presence. A dynamic that had become increasingly common in recent months as Ridge's control over Forrester Creations had tightened. "Good morning, everyone," Ridge announced, his voice commanding immediate attention. The studio fell silent. "I wanted to see what the team has been working on. Innovation is what keeps Forrester at the top, and I need to ensure every project meets our standards." It was then that Katie emerged from behind one of the design stations, carefully carrying a garment bag that contained several pieces from her collection. Her heart was beating faster than she would have liked to admit, but she forced a professional smile. "Ridge, hello," Katie said, her voice steady despite the nervousness fluttering in her chest. "I was actually hoping to get some feedback on a new project I've been developing. I think it has real potential, and I'd value your perspective as someone with such extensive industry experience." Ridge's eyebrow raised slightly. "A project? Katie, what sort of project?" Katie began to unveil the pieces, carefully removing them from the garment bag and arranging them on the display table. A jewel-toned evening gown caught the light, its intricate beading creating a subtle, sophisticated shimmer. A structured blazer in a deep emerald hung beautifully on the form, paired with tailored trousers that suggested movement and grace. A delicate cocktail dress in blush silk represented elegance in its purest form. For a moment there was silence. Katie dared to hope that perhaps Ridge would be impressed. A public destruction that hope evaporated instantly. Ridge moved to the table, picking up one of the pieces with two fingers as if it were contaminated. His expression shifted into one of barely concealed disdain. He turned to face Katie, and when he spoke, his words were sharp, deliberate, and loud enough for every person in the studio to hear. "This," he said, holding up the evening gown with obvious contempt, "is amateurish at best. Katie, I have to be honest with you, and I think the team deserves honesty. This work is simply not at a professional level. Not even close." Katie felt her stomach drop. Around her, the studio had gone quiet. Designers suddenly became very interested in their work, avoiding eye contact. The two junior designers behind Ridge exchanged uncomfortable glances. "The construction is sloppy," Ridge continued, his voice cutting through the uncomfortable silence like a knife. "The color choices are uninspired. This beading pattern? It looks like something a hobbyist would do, not someone with actual training. And the proportions of this blazer." He picked up another piece, holding it at arm's length as if to maximize the distance between himself and it. Quote, "Are completely off. The seams don't flow naturally. There's no understanding of how fabric moves, how it drapes, how it enhances the human form." He set the pieces down roughly, then turned back to face Katie directly. His eyes were cold, dismissive, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of his position as one of fashion's most celebrated designers. "Here's the thing, Katie," Ridge said, his tone almost conversational now, as if discussing something trivial. "You seem like a nice person. You come from a good family. But fashion design requires something you simply don't have. It requires an artistic sensibility, a visceral understanding of aesthetics, a soul that is fundamentally creative. Not everyone has this. Some people are meant for other things in life." He paused, letting his words sink in. "You, for instance, are excellent at public relations. You're good at managing people, at organizing events, at handling the business side of things. That's not an insult, those are valuable skills. But this, he gestured dismissively at her collection, this is not fashion. This is someone playing dress up with expensive fabric. And you're doing Logan designs, which makes this even worse. You're using your family name to get ahead. Which makes me think the work itself isn't strong enough to stand on its own merits. Katie's face had gone pale. One of the senior designers, Maria Chen, actually winced, visibly uncomfortable with the cruelty of Ridge's assessment. Another designer turned away, unable to watch. My advice? Ridge continued, already turning to leave, focus on what you do well. Let the real designers handle the design. Trying to compete in this industry when you lack the fundamental artistic vision is only going to result in embarrassment for you and, frankly, for everyone associated with this brand. With that, Ridge walked away, his two junior designers following obediently in his wake. The design studio was left in stunned silence, broken only by Katie's attempt to steady her breathing. She quickly gathered her pieces, her hands trembling, and excused herself. Several designers wanted to approach her, to offer words of support, but the damage was already done. Ridge Forrester had publicly declared Katie Logan unfit to be a designer. And he had done it in front of the entire Forrester design team. Katie walked out of the studio with her head held high, but inside, she was devastated. A witness in the shadows. What Katie didn't know, and what Ridge would never discover, was that someone had witnessed this entire exchange from just outside the glass partition that separated the hallway from the design studio. Eric Forrester had arrived at Forrester Creations at approximately the same time Ridge was delivering his cutting remarks. The legendary designer had been in semi-retirement for months now, gradually stepping back from his role and watching Ridge take an increasingly dominant position at the company. Eric had accepted this with the grace of someone who had built an empire and was willing to pass the torch to the next generation. Or so he had told himself. But standing in that hallway, his hand raised to knock on the studio door, Eric had heard every word of his son's vicious attack on Katie Logan. He had watched through the glass as Ridge systematically dismantled not just the collection, but Katie's confidence, her dreams, her belief in her own abilities. And with each cruel word from his son, something had shifted inside Eric Forrester. Eric had always been the mentor, the teacher, the man who lifted others up. He had been the father who tried to guide Ridge, to show him the importance of using power responsibly, of recognizing talent in others, of building people up rather than tearing them down. But Ridge, in recent months, had become harder, more arrogant, more dismissive of anyone whose vision didn't align perfectly with his own. This moment, this public humiliation of Katie Logan, felt like the culmination of a pattern that had been developing for far too long. Eric turned away from the studio door, his jaw clenched, his eyes hard with a determination that had been absent from his expression for months. He walked through the hallway slowly, his mind already working, already planning, already envisioning something that would prove to his son exactly how wrong he had been. The secret project revealed what Ridge didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that Eric Forrester had been working on something extraordinary for the past 6 months. In his private home studio, with only Donna knowing the full extent of his project, Eric had been designing, not for Forrester Creations, not for himself, but for Katie Logan. It had started as a simple thought months ago. Eric had observed Katie's genuine passion for design, the way she approached fashion as an art form rather than merely a business proposition. He had seen her dedication, her willingness to learn, her respect for the craft. And he had seen in her a kind of humility and drive that reminded him of himself when he was young and hungry to prove his worth to the world. So Eric had decided to mentor her, quietly, secretly, away from the politics of Forrester Creations. He had designed pieces that would complement her vision, that would elevate her collection without overshadowing it, that would represent a bridge between her artistic instincts and the technical perfection required to succeed in the competitive world of high fashion. Each piece had been crafted with meticulous attention to detail, seams that flowed like silk ribbons, proportions that enhanced rather than diminished, colors that didn't just look beautiful but told a story about the wearer, fabrics that moved with grace and elegance, responding to the human form rather than fighting against it. It was, Eric believed without question, the finest work he had done in the last decade. He had planned to surprise Katie with the collection, to present it as a gift from a mentor who believed in her potential. It was meant to be a kind gesture, a way to help a young designer find her footing in an industry that could be brutally competitive. But now, after hearing Ridge's words, after witnessing that public humiliation, Eric's motivation had transformed into something else entirely. The fire ignites that evening. Eric requested a private meeting with Katie. She arrived at his office looking exhausted, her eyes red from crying, her confidence visibly shaken. Eric closed the door behind her and gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Katie, I want to show you something," Eric said, his voice calm but filled with a steely determination. "And I want you to listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you." He opened a secured cabinet and carefully removed several garment bags, arranging them across a display table in his office. Then, one by one, he revealed the pieces he had designed, a collection that represented the perfect marriage of artistic vision and technical expertise. Katie's reaction was immediate and visceral. She moved from piece to piece, tears streaming down her face, touching the fabrics with reverence, studying the construction with awe. "Eric," she whispered, this is extraordinary. I don't understand. When did you create all of this?" "Over the past 6 months," Eric replied. "I've been watching you, Katie. I've seen your passion, your dedication, your genuine love for this craft. And I've seen something in your work that Ridge apparently couldn't see today." Katie's face crumpled at the mention of Ridge's name. "What Ridge said today was wrong," Eric continued, his voice firm. "He was cruel, he was dismissive, and he was absolutely incorrect in his assessment. But more importantly, Katie, he was afraid." "Afraid?" Katie looked at him in confusion. "Afraid that there's talent in this company that exists outside his bloodline. Afraid that you might succeed without his approval. Afraid that the world doesn't revolve around him and his vision." Eric stepped closer to the collection. "I want to tell you something, and I need you to really hear me. I'm going to help you complete this collection. These pieces of design will work alongside your own designs. Together, we will create something so magnificent, so undeniably brilliant, that it will silence anyone who dares question your abilities." He paused, his eyes meeting hers with intensity. "I'm doing this for you, Katie, because I believe in you. But I'm also doing this because someone needs to remind my son that arrogance is a poor substitute for genuine talent. And when we debut this collection, when the fashion world celebrates Logan Designs as the success it deserves to be, Ridge Forrester will have to confront the fact that he was catastrophically wrong." A vow is made. In that moment, Eric Forrester made a silent vow, a promise that burned in his chest with the intensity of a fire that had been reignited. He would dedicate every ounce of his remaining energy to making Katie's collection a masterpiece. He would use his decades of experience, his unparalleled understanding of fashion design, his extensive connections in the industry, and his credibility as a legendary designer to support her launch. But beyond that, Eric had another motivation, one that was deeply personal. He would prove to Ridge Forrester that dismissing both Katie Logan and Eric Forrester himself was not just a mistake, it was a catastrophic error in judgment. The rivalry that was about to unfold would not be a simple competition between two fashion houses. It would be about legacy, about family dynamics, about respect, and about a father reminding his son that in the world of fashion, greatness is not inherited through bloodlines or family names. Greatness is earned through dedication, through vision, through respect for the craft, and through the humility to recognize talent wherever it exists. Katie and Eric began meeting regularly, working late into the evenings, refining details, ensuring that every element of the collection was perfect. They developed a partnership that transcended the typical mentor-student relationship. Eric shared not just his technical knowledge, but his philosophy, his approach to design, his understanding of what made fashion meaningful. Katie, in turn, brought her own fresh perspective, her genuine connection to the wearer, her ability to create designs that were both beautiful and wearable for real women with real lives. The stage is set as weeks passed and the fashion show drew closer. Katie's confidence grew. She knew that what they were creating was special, was important, was undeniably excellent. Ridge had no idea what was coming. He had no idea that his own father, the man whose foundation he stood upon, had become Katie's most passionate ally. He had no idea that his public humiliation of her had inadvertently sparked a chain of events that would challenge everything he believed about his own supremacy in the design world. The date of Logan Design's debut was circled on calendars throughout the fashion industry. Invitations had been sent. Industry leaders, fashion critics, celebrities, and media outlets were already expressing interest in what Katie Logan would reveal. What they didn't know yet, what no one but Eric and Katie knew, was that they were about to witness something extraordinary. Not just a fashion collection, but a statement. A declaration that artistic talent, vision, and integrity could not be dismissed or diminished by arrogance or privilege. Eric Forrester, cast aside and underestimated by his own son, had been given an unexpected opportunity to prove his worth once more. And this time, he would not be silent. This time, he would be thunderous. The reckoning was coming. Ridge Forrester just didn't know it yet. But he soon would. And when he finally understood the extent of his own arrogance, when he witnessed the undeniable success of the collection he had so carelessly dismissed, when he realized that his own father had orchestrated this triumph, the realization would hit him like a design sketch he couldn't unsee. A mistake he couldn't undo. The rivalry between Ridge and Katie Logan, set in motion by cruelty and fueled by determination, was about to reshape the very landscape of the fashion world in Los Angeles.